A mental health disorder may be a part of who we are, but it is never all that we are. Sometimes you just need a hug. No words of advice, no outpouring of empathy. Just a hug. Be kind, be compassionate, and be good to one another.
Hey everybody, it's your girl Mama Deb. I am back. Hello, Miss Purple. Thank you for joining us tonight. So, tonight we are going to be talking a little bit about the process in which we all have to kind of go through when we have mental health disorders and even physical disorders to actually ask the question whether or not we should report to our employers that we have a physical or a mental health issue. Tonight we're going to focus on the mental health issues because that is my area of that I like to talk about. And I think that the most important thing that we have to really talk about and think about is that is it something that I need accommodations for? For me, with my disorders, I have, depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Those are the ones that get me. And for my PTSD, I absolutely 100% need to have accommodations. So for me, I tell people, I don't tell them right away when I'm hired, and I'll get into why we don't do that either. So let's start with looking at when to tell and what to tell. Okay. So when should you tell an employee? Well, employer, I'm sorry. Because of things like right to work and work at will states, which first step, you must know which one of those apply to you because they're completely and totally different things. A right to work state is, and that is the law that protects you from employers saying you have to join the union to work for us, because that is illegal. It is absolutely 100% illegal for any employer to say you have to join a. Sorry, I had to move my booze out of the way. I didn't want y'all to see it. You have to join this union in order to be employed. That is absolutely illegal. You cannot do that. Okay. Here in Oregon, we are both a right to work state and we are also a work at will state. Now, a work at will state. A work at will state is different than a right to work, and that's the thing that people need to understand, that they are totally different. A work at will state means that separation by either the employer or the employee can happen for no reason given. You can get fired for anything. They don't even have to give you a reason. They just have to say you're being let go. With that in mind, we can also quit with no reason given and no notice given. Is absolutely a courtesy, not a requirement to give 2 weeks notice. Okay? I've had a couple of employers that I have not given 2 weeks notice to. And one of them got in trouble with the American with Disability Act for actually giving me a bad review when somebody called up and said, "Hey, did she work at your company?" So know this, if someone calls for a reference, okay, your ex-employer is only allowed to say yes, they were employed from this point to this point, and they did this job. You know what? Vaguely agnostic. I think that Beck had it on for my nerves because I was having a bit of a time right before we went on. So maybe he'll shut it off here shortly. So back to what I was saying is that they're only allowed to say, yes, she was employed. Thank you, Beck. Yes, she was employed here from this date to this date. Yes, she held this position. And yes, these were her responsibilities in that position. They are not allowed to say anything else. They can give a glowing recommendation. They can give you a good recommendation, whatever the case may be. Um, but they are not allowed to say anything negative about you as an employee. Yeah, they're not allowed. It's illegal. So one job that I left, and the reason that I left is because they were not accommodating my needs. After being asked several times, you need to get a firm set schedule. You can't change your schedule like every 4 to 5 days, fitting only to fit what you need. You need to actually have her have a set schedule. And when someone called for a reference, they said, well, just so you know, she quit without 2 weeks' notice. Okay. That actually got them in trouble because the employer that I was applying to jobs with was like, did you know they said this? And I'm like, well, it's true. I didn't give them 2 weeks, and this is why. They're like, well, that's actually completely understandable. I said, okay. So I turned them in, and I didn't get any money. I wasn't looking for money, but they did taught a lesson to say that they can't say those kind of things about an employee. You can't actually tell somebody why they were fired. You can't. It is illegal to tell someone why they were fired if they're looking for a new job. You can say that we mutually parted ways, or you can say in some way, not say they were fired, or we decided to, what is the best one I heard? We decided to end their employment. They didn't use the word fired, but we all know that's darn well what we're talking about. So, that's the first thing you need to know. You need to know what responsibilities do you have to an employer versus what responsibilities the employer has towards you as the employee. Again, here in Oregon, and it may be different. Like Secular Dave is saying, it's very different in Canada. Here in the United States, it's different in just about it's not even so much as the country. It is every state is totally different. I don't know if Canada does that with their provinces, but it's completely different in every state. And depending on where, what their rules are, if they're a right to work versus a will to work, or if they're both, like here in Oregon, it just really depends. And that is one of the main things you have to know about whenever you're talking to an employer or taking a job. And I think that it's unfortunate, but I think that it's absolutely necessary that those of us who have mental health issues, we have to be more educated in how an employer can treat us, because they don't know. They truly do not know. In all the years that I've been working, and I've been working since I was probably 16, I think the longest time I ever went without a job was when I was having children. Um, so you really have to know what you're going into and what you need from them. Okay, so my recommendation, and I've read this off of several websites. My recommendation to anybody out there is, don't tell them you have a mental health disorder. Don't tell them until it's time to tell them. Yeah, wasn't that a great thing? Yeah, I know. It's confusing. The reason I say don't tell them is because it is a at will. If it is a work at will state, they cannot hire. They can say, I'm not hiring you because she has a mental health disorder. They have the right to do that. Now, that's why I'm saying don't say it, don't tell them until it's time to tell them. Because if you're having difficulties, if you're having issues with another employee, or the employer themselves, you need to then have your documentation ready to say, these are the things going on with me, and this is why it is important that you guys be brought in on it. So I do not blindly tell any employer, I'm sorry, that I have a yeah, actually, Mark, I've been working for longer than that. I'm almost 53. So I've been working since I was 16. So yeah, I've been working for a long time. I actually I don't inform anybody of it until it becomes that I'm having some difficulties. Then I'll go and talk to them about getting accommodations. So here's the key, you guys. When we have the Americans with Disability Act, absolutely guarantees that an employer must give you reasonable accommodations for any physical or mental disorder. Anyone. So how do you nice, Mark. How do you prepare yourself for that? How do you prepare yourself for letting them know this is what's going on in my world? The way that I suggest that you do it, and it is the way that I do it, is that you get medical documentation. I have documentation from my psychiatrist. I have it from my therapist, and I have it from my uh, personal, my like PCP, about all the things that are going on in my life, medically and physically, and medically and mentally. I'm sorry. So that when they say, "Oh, you have this," I can tell somebody I have PTSD till the day is done. Okay, I can tell everybody that. They're not going to believe me and put themselves in a position where they have to accommodate me unless I have the appropriate documentation. And to get that documentation, it's very easy. You just ask for a letter saying, basically, to whom it may concern, this person, for me, it'd be Deborah Nichols, is being treated by my office for the following. The important thing underneath, she's being treated for the following. You need to have your caregiver put in, she may or he may require some accommodations in order for her to do her job appropriately. You get that sentence in there, and no employer in the world is going to try to get out giving you accommodations. Okay. And it's important that you have them and update them every so often, because I have a letter from the first psychiatrist I ever saw back, like, Jesus, when I was in my 20s. So it's like 20, 25 years old. And people look at it and go, "Oh, why do I need this?" Well, what I'm showing you is that I've had this problem for over 25 years. So it's not going away. I do everything I can, but now you need to do what you can to make it easier for me to have to perform this job. So the other thing that is important, not only getting your documentation, but it's also super important that you know what the word reasonable means. Reasonable. Unfortunately, the employer, it is their interpretation of the word reasonable. It is their interpretation, not yours, theirs. So, along with getting your documentation ready, I would go to your HR person, and I would say, "Listen, I'd like to know this company's interpretation, or where in the employee manual you define reasonable." And they're of course going to go, "What? Why does she want to know this?" It's none of their business why you want to know it. Say, "I just need you to really, can you show me where that's at?" Because that is their job in HR, is to direct you where you need to be in your employee manual so that you can find what you need to find before you take action. So if they do not want to help you and they say, "Well, just look at your employee manual," that's fine. But then go through that damn thing with a fine tooth comb. Find any mention of the word reasonable or any mention of any disability and see what they say. Most of them will say, per ADA guidelines, reasonable accommodations will be made. The key here is you have to get your employer to nail down reasonable. And the reason I say that is because if you do not get them to nail it down in writing in one way or another, they're going to change their mind if they think that you're not worth the effort. And go figure, an employer thinking that an employee is not worth the effort when they're, stirring up some dust because they're not doing what they should be for the rest of the employees. You have to protect yourself. That is number one in any of these situations. You absolutely must protect yourself with documentation. So anytime you send any email anywhere to anyone regarding your job, you CC it back to yourself or to someone else so that you can get a copy of it. This is what they sent. And you're like, "Okay, that's not going to work for me because I have doctor's appointments on these days and I have to go see the doctor." And they said, "Well, if that's not going to work, you're not going to get hours this week." Print out both, print out the reply, stick it away in a file folder, whatever you want to store your stuff in. And now they have not made reasonable accommodations, because it is completely reasonable for somebody with a disability mental or physical, to be able to attend a doctor's appointment. And now most of us will try to make our doctor's appointments when we're off duty. That's reasonable for the employer to expect us to do that. However, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you need to have special accommodations given to you. Okay. Say, for example, your psychiatrist has a last minute cancellation. They're like, hey, can you be here at 3 o'clock? And your shift starts at 4. There's no way you're going to make it to your shift at 4 o'clock. You call them and say, listen, it's either go to this appointment or it's wait like 6-7 months, whatever it is, for their next opening. I must go because I have to discuss this stuff and I have to discuss my mental health with my psychiatrist. If they will not accommodate you, that is when they say, no, it's just not going to happen. We're going to give you points for it. Fine. Take the points, whatever the system is. Then you get all of your documentation, all of it. And I mean the letters. You go to that psychiatrist appointment. You're like, okay, this is the thing. They're telling me now it's not, I had to call out and da 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 da. They're like, okay, well, that again, they're going to say that's really not reasonable, because when you have mental health disorders, things are dealt with differently than physical disorders are. Okay. But the problem is, you guys, why I'm saying document is because many people will use this as an excuse. I'm having a bad depression day. I'm having a bad this day. Unless it's absolutely true, don't pull that card, because once you start pulling that card, people start doubting you. And I'll give you an example. I worked in middle management at AMR in Las Vegas. And I was doing some paperwork and trying to get all the charts turned in and everything like that. And this lady came in who worked there, and someone was giving her a really hard time. And you could just tell, or maybe it was just me, she was about ready to flip a switch. It was going to get ugly really freaking quick. I'm like, hey, you all right? What's going on? Let's just kind of calm down. Let's separate ourselves. Let's talk, see what we're doing. And what it was is that someone who was a coworker, not above or not below her, just a coworker, was saying she had to clean out this particular rig. And that was her job, was to clean out the rig, because he felt like she hadn't done enough work that night. And I went, okay, so what's going on? What about this rig is triggering you? What about it is so bad that you feel like you cannot do it? And she said, I heard the paramedics talking, and they said that all the blood in the back of the unit is from somebody who tried to kill themselves. I said, okay. And she goes, I'm bipolar. I have tried to kill myself many, many a time, and I don't think I can face it. It is completely reasonable that request was made. Completely reasonable. I had somebody else do it. I said, okay, that's easy, done. What wouldn't have been reasonable is if she had gone off the edge and started throwing things and screaming about people not understanding her bipolar disorder and putting herself in a situation where she was triggered. That would have not been reasonable. It would not have been acceptable. So when you're dealing with employee versus employer relationships, if you're going to ask for accommodations, you must be willing to be able to say, hey, listen, I need to talk to somebody, when you're not in that moment of just complete and total meltdown, because meltdown moments lead to being fired. Okay. Moments where you are being reasonable and saying, listen, I can't because of this. My ability as a middle management to come to and go, okay, hey, what's going on? Let's take this down a notch. Let's just separate whatever. That was the employer being reasonable and accommodating her so she could get her frustrations out and not be tripped over the other end, because the other employee was kind of being an ass. And in my opinion, he was kind of being an ass, because he's like, why should I have to do it? She's only done 3 trucks. I've done 4. You're going to do it because she's triggered, and you can do a better job on this one than she can because she's being triggered, and it would not be a healthy environment for anybody. So that is that's an example of why things have to go a certain way and why you have to behave in such a manner to not shoot yourself in the foot when you're talking about getting accommodations under the ADA Act. So the first thing that I think, another thing I want to talk about is the Americans with Disability Act, Title II. We're going to hit Title II because it is separate yet together. But Title II absolutely 100% addresses any federally funded college, job, system, anything that receives federal funding. If you're going to file a grievance under Title II, you're going to be you're gonna notice that the when you file under Title II, you get a little bit more of a rapid response. For example, and it falls under Title IX and Title II. Like when the women at Chico State, I believe it was Chico State, I could be Willamette College, filed for under the ADA guidelines of equal and separate. Okay, they filed that there was not a sport that was equal to football for girls, and they had just taken away their rowing sport. Okay, rowing was the equivalent for women. They're like, okay, we're going to offer this for men and this for women. They went under Title IX and Title II and said, hey, you're not accommodating us. And this is actually something that needs to be done because you are by law, by federal law, so you absolutely have to let us have accommodations because you can't discriminate against us because we're women. Same thing would have applied had they taken away their football program and said, we are going to continue with the my apologies, with the women's rowing. The men on the football team could have filed under the same thing and said, no, I don't think so, because you're taking away the equivalent for us. So that is something that is super important. Title II specifically deals with any federally funded employer or any federally funded schooling that you will feel like you are being discriminated against in. So it's a very specific area. And the reason that is so important that it's separated like that is because honestly, when things have federal funding and they get challenged, things change a lot faster than if it's just some mom and pop shop, if that makes total sense. Hold on one second. Because the mom and pop shops or the individually owned or things like that, if they don't receive federal funding, and a lot of them will, but some won't. If they don't receive any form of federal funding, they absolutely cannot. You can't file for it under Title II. So you want to make sure you're filing under the exact same where you need to be filing your grievance. Okay. So when we are talking about how many, let's take a look. I shouldn't say talking about. Let's take a look at which mental health disorders have the highest rate of needing accommodations. The thing that I don't like the way this is called, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's called comorbidity. Comorbidity means one or more mental health disorders that are together in one person, or one or more mental health disorders and a substance abuse that are together that make it harder for the individual to work under what is considered regular working circumstances. And I will use my example. My example is this. Like I've said, I have depression, anxiety, and PTSD. When I would count out my meds, and that was something I did. I was a med talk. Hold on, Mark. Let me finish what I'm saying, then I will absolutely address that comment. I would have the med count. So we'd have to pull up the narcotics and count them out and make sure it matched in the book, make sure all the pills were there, and sign it off. 2 people had to sign it off. What the problem was is the girl was taller than I am, and she would stand right over my shoulder. And she'd be looking right over my shoulder. And it would freak me out every freaking time. I'm like, I can't. I cannot have you breathing down my neck while we're doing this. You're going to need to stand to the side. And apparently that was not something she was willing to do. She would always stand over the back of me. And after like the second or third time, I finally went to my boss and I said, she's got to stop this. I cannot have her doing this to me. And this is why she's triggering me. It's putting me in a space where I cannot be on point where I need to be so that I can get these meds passed and what have you. In that case, it was the combination of the three that put me to the place where they're like, you know what, we have to reasonably accommodate her. And that employee is going to need to stop doing what they're doing to her. They're going to need to stand off to the side so she can see them and not just feel them breathing down her neck. And it worked. It worked. I had no ramifications or repercussions of any of that stuff, but that was just my one of my experiences. So let me look at Mark's comment here. Do you like the idea of talking to your boss? Thank you. And settling up a give and take system where they make accommodations for you, and to pay them back you do favors for them if you can. Wow, Mark, I hadn't really thought about that. I think as long as both parties are okay with it and nobody feels like they're being pressured into it, if it works for both parties, then yes, you should be able to do something like that. However, I feel like when you use the word favors, that is going to lean into the employee having to work more hours, or like, do the employer calls you up, hey, so and so had to go home sick, and can you come in and cover the last 2 hours of their shift? I have no problem doing that as an employee. I have no problem doing it whatsoever. What I would have a problem with is they said, hey, so like we made those accommodations for you. Could you maybe help us out? I would have a problem with somebody leading with that. So I think that what you're talking about is like, it would be it's going to be person to person, and it's absolutely going to vary in the way that people speak to you and the way that they approach things. Because being told, hey, I accommodated you, puts my back up, and I'd be like, well, you had to accommodate for me, MFer, because it's the law. But I will tell you this, in my research and my dealings with employers, I have found that the more you know, the more educated you are, and the more you call them on their bullshit, the less they like you. So you really have to pick and choose your battles. When I say pick and choose your battles, I think the most important thing, sorry, I'm reading Mark's thing again. So yeah, I agree, Mark. It's a case by case thing. It is an absolute case by case thing, and the relationship that goes on between employer and employee. That's absolutely absolutely true. It's case by case. The other thing is like when I was talking about how they get a little bit overwhelmed when you know so much. There are certain times to flex, and there's certain times not to flex. And me saying you can't do that because of this law at the very beginning of a conversation is not the right time to flex. It absolutely is not. The right time for me to flex or demand my rights is at the end of the meeting when they're like, okay, so any more questions? I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I have one more. And they're like, what's that? I'm like, can I get a copy of everybody's notes who was in this room? They're like, oh, no, that's private. No, actually, it's not. It's part of my employee record. You're going to need to make copies of those, and you're going to need to give them to me. Absolutely, they have got to. And they don't want to, but they'll make the copies, and I don't let them out of my sight. I got burned one time by letting somebody out of my sight, and I then went and I asked for them, and it was only one page when they had like 7 pages. So I know there was stuff I didn't get. So I walked to the copy machine with them, and they make notes and they give them to me. I said, well, okay, thank you very much. And I just let it go at that. The reason again for that is because documentation. I will document everything that is being said in those meetings and the way it's being presented to me. If we can help you, how can we help you, type of thing, because you have to be able to protect yourself, but not in a really super aggressive manner, because employees, I don't know what it is about employers, but they get like all sorts of like threatened when an employee knows what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to be treated. Absolutely, they do. Especially like during this whole COVID thing. Okay. You had to have a mask on. You absolutely had to have a mask on. Okay, that's a given, right? Well, I was working nights, and the person who would bring our drugs every night for delivery, they're like, well, here, you need to sign my paperwork. I said, I'm not touching that clipboard. I don't know where you've been or what you've been doing. This is before we knew how COVID was contracted and all that stuff. It was in the very early days. She was like, well, you have to. I said, no, I don't. I said, slide it under the gate. I'll get my own pin. I'll sign it without touching it. And I said, and she goes, well, what are you going to do about the bags? I trust the bags. I said, the bags have to sit outside for 20 minutes after they've been disinfected. I can't take them inside until they've done that. And she's like, that's the most ridiculous thing ever. I'm calling my boss. I'm having you written up. I said, well, you go ahead and do that. Go ahead, waste your time, but whatever. So they said, well, what did you say to her? And this is what I've told them, exactly what I said to her. I said, that's our policy. Our company policy is this. I followed our company policy to the letter. And I even told her, would you like a copy of our company policy? She's like, no, nobody else does it. Why are you special? I said, I'm special because I'm following company policy. And anytime you're going to do something like that and say, no, I'm not, make sure you have your company policy and your employee manual there with you to back you up, because that's what employers will use to try to not have to accommodate you because you acted in a certain manner. So again, I have to go back to, it's me personally would never tell somebody in the very beginning what was going on with my mental health, because again, that is a very private matter. And it is for me to deal with. And unfortunately, people judge you. They absolutely judge you when they find out you have mental health problems. And I don't know how diabetes and hypertension should be judged less than depression and anxiety, but they are, because so many people believe you just have to, if you're strong enough, you can push through it. Well, honey, I got news for you. If I was strong enough, I would have pushed through it 40 years ago, instead of, here at 53, still discovering what works and how it works for me. So, again, with the employers, you really just have to be so careful in how you do it, the way that you approach them. Never come at them from a point of anger, not ever, even if it is, they're like, we're going to have to let you go. And you want to go, listen, motherfucker, I gave my heart and soul to this place. You don't do it. You don't do it. You're like, okay, can I see why? Can you tell me why? Can I have the written documentation of why you're letting me go? And if they balk at that, once again, it is illegal for them not to provide some form of written documentation. It may say she was fired because we just didn't like her. And that's actually reasonable in my state because we are an at-will state. They can fire you for any time, anything, anywhere, and wow. They can fire me because they don't like my new haircut. I mean, that's how it can be. And again, that's why employees don't need to give the 2-week notice. Is not legally required. It is a courtesy. Okay. And again, you'd have to be more, you'd have to know the inner workings of your job to know if there was a need for that courtesy. Like this, I just recently quit my job. There was no need for the 2 weeks because my backup behavioral therapist was like, yeah, I'll just move in and take over tomorrow. I'm like, okay, cool. So I didn't have to give notice. I think that it's important that you consider that. I don't think you should be quitting on a whim, but I think that you should honestly, you be all open and honest and be like, I can't because of this, and hopefully they'll respect that. I can't guarantee anything because, people are kind of shitty that way. They don't really take other people's, feelings or medical problems or what have you into account. They just want to get out whatever's the easiest thing for them. An example I'm going to give you now is like I was at home. I was not on call that evening. I was not on call. Someone else was on call. And so, of course, I came home. I was like, fuck, I'm going to have a beer. I'm not on call. I don't have to stay sober. Well, the person who was on call decided they were going to drink also. And I'm like, they called me. They're like, we need you to come in. I said, I can't come in. I've been drinking. I cannot drive. I cannot come in, be anywhere near medications when I've been drinking. No way in hell. They said, either get an Uber and get into the office or you're fired. And I promptly said, well, I guess then you're going to have to fire the person who is on call tonight. I'm not even on call. And if their excuse is they've been drinking, then they're in violation of their employee contract, not me. Because if you're not on call, you can drink. If you're on call, you cannot, because you might be required to handle some managerial stuff. So, what ended up happening was that my husband drove me down to my office so I could shut off the alarms. And I wouldn't even go in the med room. I was not. They're like, "Oh, Deb, come in." I go, "Nope, I'm not going anywhere near that med room. I'm intoxicated. I don't want nobody saying I was in that med room doing anything. No way in hell." I shut off the external alarms. I did what I needed to do. I text my regional manager saying, "Hey, just so you know, not text, email, just so you know, I was told if I didn't come in, then I was going to be fired. So I found a ride, but I'm not going anywhere in that med room. This is why, because I'm intoxicated and it's not appropriate to be intoxicated while on duty." So I said, I will forego the pay because you're not going to pay me for getting here and then say you came to work intoxicated. And so in turn, I guess back to what Mark was saying, in the favor system, I received like $150 gift certificate to take my family to dinner. That was their way of paying me because I came in, I did what I needed to do to make everybody comfortable. And I'm like, why is this even happening? And of course, the person who said I had to come in or I was going to be fired was my supervisor, who was the next one to come up. And she also had been drinking. So one of us had to come in. And thank God I was smart enough to say, this is how you're going to do it. Because sometimes when you get into those positions where you're given some authority and you don't handle it correctly, and they're like, we're just looking for a scapegoat. Well, let me tell you, if you're middle management, you are the scapegoat. Okay. You are the person that they are going to be looking at to get rid of because things got to, be too out of control. Okay. So the other thing is like, okay, so let me backtrack a little bit here. We're talking about comorbidity, morbidity. I hate that word, man. Anyway, so the one things that we will see the most of that require for mental health that require accommodations a lot, and I would say most frequently, is schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And there's a damn fine reason why. Because if somebody is having a schizophrenic incident, they are not in any shape to be at work. Even if they came in and it got triggered where they were at work, they're still in no shape to be there. They should be able to go to someone and say, "Hey, I'm having a schizophrenic episode. I know this because of this," or call someone, which I think we all have a friend who's had these issues. And I think that she would call someone and say, "Hey, got to get her out of here," if she was working, because it's not, whatever's going to happen at that point is going to be completely against the employee code of conduct. And she absolutely has the right to protect herself and to be reasonably accommodated because she's coming to you with a reasonable request. You can't tell her as an employer, "No, I'm not giving you the day off because you're having a schizophrenic, issue. You get your shit together." No, you can't do that. That is against the law. You absolutely must make some form of accommodation. And she does not have to, or he, whoever it is, does not have to stay there while the employer tries to find somebody to come in to cover her shift. They absolutely do not have to do that. And that's something that employers take advantage of. "I need you to stay until we find a replacement." No, nope, it's not going to happen. And be reasonable about it. Just don't go F off. I mean, I know we're all tempted, but you have to tell them, "I can't. I absolutely cannot for this reason, and I have to go. I've got to get out of here." And that is absolutely that is assuming reasonable accommodations. That is absolutely reasonable. The reason that middle management or management doesn't want you to leave before they get your replacement is because now they have to do your job. Okay. They have to step up and do your job, which is what they should be doing, because anybody who says it's not my job is full of crap. If you're an immediate supervisor of someone and they have to go home, you are well trained on how to do their job. You may not want to, but you are very well trained. So it is a reasonable accommodation to let you go home early because you're having issues with your mental health. When we're seeing things like bipolar disorder, and unfortunately, this one is so hard. It's schizophrenia is difficult. It really is. But with bipolar disorder, I have found the people I have had to deal with are even harder Because schizophrenia, there's no denying. If you know what you're looking for, you're like, yep, you need to be gone. Okay, let's get you out of here. Let's just be safe. With bipolar disorder, unfortunately, when they go manic, um, they are very much like, I'm fine. I'm good. Don't worry about it. I'm just going to go paint 6 walls and I'm going to come back and do my paperwork in about 20 minutes. And I'm going to go restock this and do this and do this. You're like, oh, no, 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 no. You can't do that because they think they get the tasks accomplished, but they actually do not. They are actually leaving it halfway through because they get distracted and on to another project when they're manic. With bipolar mania, it is absolutely so imperative as a manager or as a person who's going through it, you must get a second person in the room with you. I absolutely, without fail, anytime there's a disciplinary anything, I ask for a witness. And the reason that I do that is because it's a reasonable accommodation, because employers don't want other people to know what's going on and why they're firing you or why you're being disciplined. You absolutely have that right to ask for a peer to represent you or to be there with you. Now, just know that when you do that, you're going to find that the employee that you brought with you is now going to be brought into an investigation and talked to about things and so on and so forth. So it is of your best interest to have somebody that you know that is aware of your mental health disorder, but not to the point that they're like personally like your best friend who knows everything about you. You don't want that person in there, even though they'll fight for everything that you have. They'll fight for you tooth and nail. You want somebody who's just a little bit on the outside, who has enough knowledge to go, listen, can you not see she's not acting normally? Can you not see she needs accommodation? And it comes down to the point of educating ourselves. We have to know what we can and cannot do. And when I say that, I'm going to apply this to not only to an employer, but I'm going to apply it to doctors, therapists, anybody. Okay. You have the right to say whether or not somebody is in the room with you when things are going down. Doctors will say, we don't allow people. Nope, you do allow. You do allow people, especially people with mental health disorders. You are absolutely 100% allowed to have an advocate in the room with you anytime you are talking about a mental health disorder. In fact, anytime you're talking about any disorder, you are allowed to have an advocate in there with you. Because for me, and I'm sure there are several people out there who are going to say the same thing, I forget sometimes. When I'm in a state of anxiety, I'm lucky if I remember what the F my middle name is and how to tie my shoe. Okay. I'm not going to remember what the doctor said to me. So I have to have an advocate with me. We make it a point whenever I sign up for anything, new insurance, doctors, employer, whatever. My husband is my caretaker. All information may be released to my husband. Okay. Sometimes that can bite you in the ass in a state of divorce, but you are allowed to have an advocate. They don't have to be your spouse. It can be your brother, your grandma, your sister, your best friend, your whatever the case may be. But you are allowed to have an advocate. Do not let an employer tell you you are not allowed. If they say to you, I am not allowed to have, you're not allowed to have an advocate in here with you, you'll say, yeah, you will tell them, yes, I am. It's a reasonable accommodation because of my mental health disorder. Under the ADA, I am absolutely allowed to have an advocate in here, just like you are allowed to have an advocate in here to protect yourself from anything that might be said or misinterpreted. So when you put it back in the employer's lap and say, hey, get yourself somebody too, you're not demanding anything that you're not willing to give. And that is the key to dealing with people who are in a position where they think they can force you to do something their way and you know better. Approach it in that manner because they are much more likely to say, hey, you know what, she's right. Let's just calm this down. Let's just do what we have to do. So what not to do? What not to do would be what Deborah did a couple jobs ago. And I let my emotions get the best of me. I was so frustrated with this particular nurse. She's like, I need these orders. I said, you know what? I handed you the orders 25 minutes ago. What did you do with them? She goes, they're not here. I said, yes, they are. She's like, well, where? I'm like, give me a minute. So I took the orders outside because I was trying to do 5 things at once. Found the order. It was on the back of a paper. It should have been front side. That's the way orders are supposed to be sent over on Semper Fax. Should be one page and one page only. Well, it was on the back side. You just had to look. Use your eyes, right? So I walked back down and smacked it down on the table. I said, "Here is your order." He should have had his medicine 45 minutes ago. When I first brought the problem to you, I gave you an answer at 25 minutes. Now you're telling me here 45 minutes ago, we still don't have the medication. I said, and I faxed the pharmacy 30 minutes ago. So what's the problem? What is the problem here? She's like, well, we got distracted because one of our hospice patients is self-medicating with morphine. And you know what? I'm not proud. I am not proud of myself at all because I am a much better person than what my next sentence is going to portray me as. I remember looking at that nurse and go, "You've got to be fucking kidding me, right?" I go, "You're more concerned about a woman who's dying, actively dying, giving herself morphine over the man who has ALS that needs morphine so his pain is under control. He's not dying yet." She's like, "Well, some things are more important." I go, "Well, obviously, if they're more important, then get off your ass and go down there and fucking take her morphine from her and don't let her give her to herself if you feel that adamant about it." Yeah. So needless to say, I got fired the next day. And for very absolutely 100% good reason. I did not present myself in a way that was acceptable for the facility. But again, I filed a counter complaint against the nurse. And let's be honest, I was the head of a division. I ran the health division. Okay, I ran the caregivers, all of that stuff. She's a nurse. She's in a entity in herself. They fired me. They suspended her. But the thing is, when I went to go reapply for another position in the same company, I was still eligible for rehire because my point was made. I kept the documentation when they fired me the next day. I said, "That's fine. I want all the documentation from all the meeting notes, everything." She came in and complained. He complained, like, "Give me all the notes." When I had all those notes and I sent it into corporate office, I said, "I did not handle it correctly. You're absolutely right. I did not. However, I have a valid point." And they're like, they came back to me and said, "You know what? You did have a valid point. You just should not have swore at another employee. You're absolutely correct. I should not have." But that's some of the things that happen when we are in the midst of I can't even think right now. I just totally drew a blank. I'm so sorry, you guys. That's what happens when you were dealing with mental health issues, is that sometimes you don't think like a reasonable adult. Uh-oh, what happened? Oh, sorry, I disappeared there for a second. We sometimes don't come across as come across reasonably. We might not come across as the adults that we are or the good work people that we are because of the mental health issues getting in the way. And that's why we have to protect ourselves and really have to know what our rights are so that when we are faced in a situation where you're like, "Oh shit," it happens once, you can go for accommodations. Okay. You're like, "Listen, this is what happened. This is how it happened. Here's my documentation saying this is what's going on with me. I really just need somebody to not do that." Okay. Yes, you're absolutely correct, Mark. You're absolutely correct. And one of the things that I will tell you that I did with a previous employer, I was working nights, and for some reason it became nights was my specialty. I could get a med room in shape in less than 6 months from being like audited by the state, going to close the place down. I could get it in shape in less than 6 months and be ready to go. So that became my specialty. And I knew it. I knew that they were going to get rid of me after I got everything set. So, I would set forth, these are the things that need to happen in order for me to take this job and do this for you. But one of the things I learned was that when I was walking around giving meds in the middle of the night, someone thought it would be funny to walk up behind me, grab me by my shoulder and sing and scream at me. Yeah, it wasn't funny because number one, I have PTSD. Number two, you got punched in the effing face. So then she calls the supervisor and says, "Deborah just punched me in the face." And I said, "This is why I punched her in the face." I did get suspended, but then I got brought back once they did all the investigation and they had all of my documentation. They're like, "You shouldn't have done it." I'm like, "Yeah, you have to accommodate me. And accommodating me is telling people that they cannot walk up behind me and freaking try to scare me like that because I will punch you in the face." or I'll punch you somewhere. I'm going to respond like I'm under attack because that's one of the things that how I react to certain situations because of the domestic violence that I was the domestic violence situation I was in. Let's see. What was that? Screaming on a No, you're right. It's not. Screaming is not a good thing to do. It really isn't, but not a great thing to do anytime. Even if you have to remove yourself, you can ask for that. You can say, okay, you know what? I need a few minutes to process what's going on here. I'm going to go ahead and walk away and get a drink, and then I'm going to come back. You are allowed to do that. You do not have to sit in the station where they have 5 people staring at you going, okay, this is what you should have done. This is what you're going to do. This is what we're going to do to you. No, you have the right to process, walk away. I'll be back in 10 minutes. I just need to process and work and whatever. And you can actually make a phone call. If they say, no, you have to leave your phone here, that is not true. That absolutely is not true. What they can say is you're not allowed to record the meeting. Recording the meeting is one thing. Having your phone with you and using it to call somebody to help calm you down is absolutely 100% an accommodation that they should be making for you. So, yeah, so I feel like this was a completely dry topic, but I hope that it had some helpful hints for everybody. And please, please, please share and like. Oh yeah, no, absolutely, Mark, you're right. The person who did that was absolutely wrong. It was honestly, it was an 18-year-old girl who thought it would be funny. They don't think at that age. You're absolutely correct that it is not the right thing to do. What she did was completely wrong. But yeah, so guys, please, 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 please like and subscribe. And if you want to follow some more, I do little clips from the show, and I do little things also on mental health on TikTok. Please like and subscribe. I'm really working really hard to get up to that elusive 1,000 so I can get monetized, and I would appreciate any help y'all can give me. All right, you guys. On that note, I am going to say goodbye for the night. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. If you're in Oregon like I am, stay freaking warm, you guys, because it was 20 degrees when my husband got up to go to work this morning. It was at 5 a.m. 20 degrees. Yeah, that's not in Oregon weather. Okay, not where I'm at. Not where I'm at, and not where I currently live at all. And vaguely, that is absolutely no problem. I can understand why it would be distracting. I just needed a little bit in the beginning, but I'm glad that we could accommodate each other and actually make this a positive experience for everybody involved. All right, y'all. On that note, I will talk to you guys later. Love to everyone. And remember, 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 be good to yourself, love yourself, and you're perfect exactly how you are. Bye. Have a good week.